things stop you in your tracks like the aroma of fresh brewing coffee. And wherever you spot this green mermaid logo, you know a fresh brew isn't far away. Since opening its first store in 1971, Starbucks has taken the everyday cup of joe and turned it into a full-blown coffee culture, whipping up caramel macchiatos, velvety lattes, and frosty frappuccinos with flavors that go far beyond the standard drip. In this episode, we're headed out to the source to see how Starbucks gourmet beans are grown and roasted, then inside the cafe to watch skilled baristas turn those beans into your favorite coffeehouse creations. Before the barista ever pulls a shot of espresso, it all starts thousands of miles away, in a network of countries circling the globe known as the Coffee Belt, where most of the world's Java takes root. Brazil dominates this network as the world's top exporter, followed by Vietnam, Colombia, with Hawaii and Puerto Rico contributing a modest share from American soil. Among this global web of growers, Starbucks ranks as one of the industry's biggest buyers, purchasing 800 million pounds of green coffee annually from more than 30 countries. And every pound of that is entirely 100% Arabica, a more expensive bean chosen for its smoother mouthfeel and more nuanced flavor, with much of it sourced from the rugged landscapes of South America. Starbucks is so transparent about where their beans come from that you can scan a traceability barcode on the back of any retail bag and track it to the exact region it was grown. These are the towering green slopes of the Andes Mountains in Colombia, majestically rising nearly 6,000 feet above sea level. Their steep terrain, volcanic soil, steady rainfall, and cool mountain air create just the kind of environment coffee cherries thrive in. Both commercial species, Robusta and Arabica, are grown in this rugged region, but they live in different bands of the mountain. Robusta is cultivated down in the valleys, where the climate is warmer and more humid. Its cherries take about 9 to 11 months to develop from flower to full fruit, and often ripen in dense clusters, with a few underripe cherries scattered in. And because the terrain within the valley is more leveled out, machine harvesting is the most cost-effective strategy. These machines sweep through the rows, shaking and stripping the branches violently, collecting whatever falls, both ripe and unripe cherries altogether. While this approach produces a higher yield, mixing ripe and unripe fruit drops the quality significantly, which is why Robusta is usually sold as cheap instant or commodity coffees that Starbucks strictly avoids. Higher up the mountain, above 3,000 feet, where the air thins and temperatures drop, Arabica cherries flourish. This altitude slows their maturation, giving the beans more time to develop a sweet and nuanced flavor along the way. On any given branch, you'll see a mix of stages, some cherries fully red, others still green, which, combined with the steep slopes, makes machine harvesting nearly impossible. As a result, each tree has to be picked by hand, cherry by cherry, and thankfully, all this hard work will result in a great cup of coffee. It's slow, labor-intensive work, yet it's the only way to get the layered complexity that makes Arabica so sought after, and a key reason Starbucks commits to using it alone in its specialty roasts. With their baskets filled with red Arabica cherries, workers empty their haul into sacks, then carry their harvest down the hillside for transport to the wet mill. Speed becomes critical at this stage because the cherries must be stripped of their outer layers within 8 to 12 hours before their sugars begin to break down. Every afternoon, over 100 farmers show up at this wet mill with the day's harvest, some arriving from small family farms to larger commercial growers. It's just one facility among thousands participating in Starbucks' CAFE, or Coffee and Farmer Equity Practice, a global sourcing network that aims to pay fair prices, track where the beans come from, and invest profits back into the farming communities across the coffee belt. Upon arrival, each delivery is weighed, recorded, and tied to the farmer, so payment can be made based on both volume and quality. Their freshly picked cherries are then funneled into a flume of clear water for a first separation step called floating. Heavier, high-density cherries, the ones thereafter, will sink to the bottom, while the lighter ones called floaters will drift on the surface to be skimmed off and reserved for lower-grade coffees. The dense cherries continue down the channel toward a screw auger, which feeds them into a machine called the Depulper at a controlled pace. Inside the Depulper, the cherries are squeezed between the outer wall of this spinning drum and a hard surface, forcing the beans out through small openings while the skins and pulp are pushed aside. The discarded fruit pulp is gathered and reused as compost, feeding the next generation of coffee trees, which allows the circle of life to continue. The freed beans continue in a stream of water into these rotating screens that acts as a sifter, separating out any intact cherries and larger fragments that slipped through the first stage so they can be diverted and processed again. Then the beans move into these fermentation cells, where they soak from 12 to 24 hours. This resting period breaks down the slimy mucilage coating the parchment, softening it so it can be later rinsed away without damaging the beans. The following day, fresh mountain water along with the fermented beans are channeled into these long washing troughs. Workers wait alongside, using long paddles to stir and push the beans against the current, stripping away the loosened mucilage as the water carries it downstream. Grading also happens right here within these channels. As workers agitate the stream, the heavier top-quality beans will sink to the bottom and are pushed upstream underneath the current, while the lighter defects that are hollow and full of air float to the surface and drift downstream, where they're collected separately and sold at a lower price. While not top quality, they still generate income for the producers. The dense Arabica beans are then directed into this soaking cell where any lingering mucilage is removed. A producer performs a final hand test, checking that the beans aren't sticky as they flow into the drying cell. Now the slimy layer is fully washed away. The beans are clean, but still too wet, holding close to 35% their weight in moisture. To dry them out, workers spread them across this wide cement patio to dry in the sun. Throughout the day, they rake and turn them so every bean gets its fair share of sunlight, slowly drying them down to about 11% moisture over 4 or so days. When the beans hit the right dryness, they're still wrapped in a thin protective layer called parchment, kind of like the papery skin around a peanut. A milling machine strips this away by rubbing the beans against each other until the shell breaks off, revealing the pale grayish-green raw coffee beans hidden inside. Those green beans are then portioned into sturdy burlap or jute bags with a porous material that keeps air flowing throughout, preventing mold and degradation. After each sack is filled with roughly 100 pounds, they're sewn closed, then transported to this spacious storage facility. In here, the beans sit and mature, slowly developing more depth and character as they await export. At this stage, the producer can choose to sell the beans as part of a blend or as single origin. Single origin means the beans are sourced from one particular country, region, or individual farm, letting the distinctive character of that location, its altitude, weather, and soil stand out clearly in the final brew. But the batch we're following is headed for Starbucks specialty blends, so the next stop is one of their roasting facilities to see how these green beans are brought to full flavor. After a long voyage across the oceans, the beans land at one of several Starbucks large-scale roasting plants scattered worldwide. This particular U.S. plant alone covers nearly 400,000 square feet and produces more than 100 blends and single-origin coffees. Every week, over 2 million pounds move through its roasting lines, and production never stops, roasting and packaging around the clock, 24 hours a day. Before the entire shipment is accepted, a small probe sample is pulled from a burlap bag and taken to the sensory lab for a trial roast. In the lab, a panel of expert tasters known as Q graders will evaluate the lot using a method called cupping. Once the sample is roasted and ground, hot water is poured over the grounds and left to form a crust on top. The graders use 2 spoons to break that surface layer, releasing the aromas, then lean in for several focused sniffs. Next, they slurp the coffee forcefully so it sprays across their entire palate, judging balance, sweetness, acidity, and any off notes, before spitting the liquid out to avoid any heavy caffeine hit. If those cups line up with Starbucks Premium Roast Profile, the shipment gets approved and released into the main roasting stream. Production begins as pallets of green coffee are brought in by forklift and set onto this Cimbria sifting machine. Workers slice open the burlap bags, letting the beans drop through floor grates into a hopper below. Then a conveyance system moves them into the vibrating sifter that shakes away any field debris through a mesh screen. They're then pneumatically fed into these towering green storage silos that rise nearly 40 feet high, each one able to hold up to 180,000 pounds of green coffee. At their conical base, a web of tubing feeds a dosing system that draws precise percentages of single-origin Arabica from different silos, quietly building Starbucks' top-secret house blends, like Odyssey Blend, Green Apron Blend, and others, before the custom mix gets released into the roasting drum. Inside the roaster, internal baffles keep the beans in constant motion to prevent scorching as temperatures approach 500 degrees Fahrenheit. At this intense heat, a series of interesting transformations takes place. First, the last traces of moisture evaporate. Then, trapped gases build up pressure inside the beans until they burst, making a popping sound that roasters call the first crack, which causes them to swell to nearly twice their original size. After that first crack, the roaster must monitor the batch second by second in order to make Starbucks' 3 main roast profiles. Blonde roasts are pulled soon after the first crack, typically around the 10-minute mark. Medium roasts extend a few minutes longer, closer to 13 minutes, deepening their color and flavor. Dark roasts can continue up to 18 minutes, or even into the second crack, where oils rise to the surface and their profile turns bold and smoky. When their desired roast level is reached, the front of the drum swings open and a wave of perfectly roasted, delicious coffee beans spill out onto this perforated cooling tray. Rotating arms stir the pile, while powerful fans pull air down through the bed, quickly bringing the temperature down to 200 degrees Fahrenheit in just a few minutes, stopping the roast in its tracks. Once cooled, the beans discharge through the bottom of the tray and carried away in a pneumatic tube that pull off papery chaff and other light waste. They then enter these large rotating tumblers where they're mixed with other roasted batches and flavors to create Starbucks proprietary blends. Each combination is proportioned to bring out specific flavor notes. Some are built around rich chocolate, others around smooth caramel, or toasted nutty undertones, resulting in staples like Café Verona, Pike Place, and Sirens blend. Throughout this blending stage, exposure to air is kept at a minimum because oxygen exposure is one of the fastest ways to dull that fresh roasted taste. The finished blends travel through another set of pneumatic lines to the packaging area, where scales portion out exact weights, drops them into bags, and clamps them with a tight hermetic seal to lock in the freshness. Since fresh roasted coffee beans will naturally release carbon dioxide over the following days, each package gets stamped with a small one-way valve that allows the CO2 to vent out, but stops oxygen from flowing back in, preserving their peak freshness while on the shelf. Before any bag leaves the roastery, it faces a final pressure and leak test, then gets packed into cases and sent to stores around the world. Once they land on the shelf, they're ready for you to grind, brew, and bring a full cafe experience into your own kitchen. Curious to see how these specially roasted beans become stacked macchiatos and whipped cream-topped desserts? Click the next video and watch what happens inside the cafe. Thanks for tuning in to Made Vision. We'll see you in the next one.